Okay, any burning questions that we need to attend to now? If you have a question that is troubling you, rather get rid of it now because you might forget it and then disappointment.
You talk about manipulating carbon, so the techniques for that are primarily the animal impact and, well, question what's the technique for manipulating carbon?
Manipulating carbon basically is density and time, but at all times you monitor for animal performance, because if you don't get the carbon down today, you might get it down tomorrow, or next graze, or next 6 months, who cares? But as long as you provide a full opportunity to your livestock of every plant on the property. So you've got to keep most plants in a vegetative stage. If you can't do it with livestock, you do it with a mower. And the mower mustn't be a mower that is going and cutting in one direction, because that smothers behind. Try and use a gyro mower that is going to throw things around, and just leave the hay there, don't bale it, don't move it off. You're adding carbon. You are just then doing something mechanically which you haven't achieved through livestock.
My scenario is a hill country, so I won't be, it's totally livestock.
Now, if you're on hills country, you do what you can do. Goes back to quality of life. If it's not what you want, sell the property and find another one that is flat. That obviously made me think a little bit. I'm in the same situation because I'm on the property that my great grandfather bought in 1863. You know, if I sell a property, I'm a failure. Even though the rest of the critters in the family are enjoying life with independence and doing what they want to do. But because I'm a fool who's farming, unfortunately it's not my fault. Question? What I'm actually saying is there's plenty of opportunities. Just look further than what we tend to look at. And you don't have to do it.
Ian, we were working on sort of eat a third, leave a third, destroy a third, and we were on 3-day shifts. We're now on daily shifts, and we're working on eating half. We haven't made hay or baleage for 4 years, and we're running half the stock we should, yet we've increased stocking rate. What's the upside from here?
To answer the first question, eat a third, shed a third, leave a third, is what I used to speak, what I used to say. And so one of my critics in America said to me, or wrote on Facebook, how do you tell a cow to eat a third? So I don't speak about that anymore because that's what a cow does. So I avoid that terminology. But the upside of what you're doing is you should have enough carbon and soil life to more than double your stocking rate. So I said earlier, most properties starting, I suggest that they take their best paddocks, best part of their property, work on that, because that should produce enough to satisfy the animals you have presently. And the other half, you can grow into it, or you can lease it out, or you can do what you like with it. But to start with in the first year, it's a safety net if you make a mistake. I'll ask you a question. Often I go for the tangent, guys, and I don't answer the question. So pull me back if I haven't answered the question.
So, what do you think of the graze half now?
I think if you're grazing half, you are leaving your animals in too long, because they're grazing the second bite, and the second bite hasn't the right amount of energy, you've lost animal performance. Sorry, I
Better shift some stock, go home and shift some stock.
So we better go and shift the stock. We're gonna do it tonight.
Yeah, we're on daily shifts now.
So with
Whatever you like.
with your 3/3, or whatever you want to call it, that works for cattle. With the sheep, it's more difficult to get that trampling balance side of things. And a lot of us are sheep-based farmers. It is, you're coming to our place tomorrow, it is our challenge at the moment, is trying to get that working. And I don't expect to get perfect trampling every rotation, or every grade, but it's pretty difficult because of course their browsing, the way they browse. We found it really difficult without 5 minutes a day.
So don't try and do more than you can do. You just do what you can do and carry on, because things will change. And as things change, you'll find that you actually did a better job than you thought you were going to do. I have found sheep often are better than cattle in terms of getting carbon on the ground. Because of their ability, sometimes when you go and collect them, they run round before they go out the gate. And in running round, you're doing the job far better than any cattle ever did.
How are you thinking about putting the carbon on the ground? Is that by trampling rather than the plant taking it down?
Well, the plant is not really going to take it down unless you've left it there for a full year and it's got so brittle that it's going to fall over in the next wind. But then you've lost the benefit of your solar panel. Energy is money, and you want to harvest the money when it's available. Have I answered your question? No.
Not really.
Okay. Pose it in a different way. Ask me the question in a different way.
Well, you're sort of saying, like, with trampling, that's going to put the carbon under the ground. I was of the belief that you get the carbon to go down through the roots.
The carbon pathway that Christine Jones talks about.
Yeah.
Yes, but then I don't want to talk about that one here because it starts getting complicated.
But how does trampling put carbon on the ground?
It tramples the plant down. The plant is carbon. You see, I'm trying to keep it simple. Once you start going carbon pathways, you're now getting into science and technology, and people don't get it. That's why I try and keep away from those sort of things. And what I talk about is really things that we all can do and we can see. Carbon pathways and all those things, you can't really see them, you've got to believe them and see the result. But they work. It's all part of the whole. But what she's talking about is going into the science of it deeper than I am. That's all.
So the carbon's coming from the grass that's broken off and then dies and rots down.
So I'm saying to you that if you were grazing a mosaic, you come in behind and you mow at 9 inches to bring it all back into a vegetative stage, don't remove that brown. Because brown is carbon. And it is hay, and you're wanting that in the soil, on the soil. You want to cover the soil, and when we get onto the slides about plants, you will understand fully what I'm talking about.
You talk about mowing after it's gone to seed or before, keep it all in the vegetative state to count grazing.
I've only suggested that in desperation, because this time in America guys just couldn't get it. And I just said, well, can't mow the bloody stuff. I'd rather they didn't. Until I got to a dairy farm where, this is some years ago, gave a 3-day workshop, and the host that night would challenge me about this not mowing, and I said, you don't have to mow, don't have to mow, don't have to mow. And the last night did he say to me, my wife mows. And I said, well, there's something else to this now. I said, tell me more. And he said, no, my wife likes to sit in a tractor with a big bush hog as wide as this room, bush hog all her lands. And boy, when I looked at his wife and her size, I said, fine, she wants to bush hog. That's her hobby, it's a quality of life issue. It's got nothing about making money. I do have a living experience, but that's what keeps me going. Good. So we'll go on, and this is legumes. They came up to my chest. They flowered, they seeded, and 1 year I couldn't make it back to America, and this guy heard about grazing pork, and that's what he did. But I want you to see what his cows look like. This is the middle of summer, and look at the ribs. After that trip, I just went to him and I said, you must understand, I can't come and talk at a workshop with cattle like that. Unless you change something, get somebody else, that's fine. But I can't talk to cattle like that. But what he did achieve was that 462 earthworms in one cow pie. So we didn't even bother to dig in the soil, but that's in a cow pie. So he did do some benefit, but it didn't put any money in his pocket. He wasn't selling those for fishing. So we go to Mexico, and that's what it looked like in the Chihuahua Desert. There's no topsoil, there's no grasses, there's no nothing. And some years ago, 12 Mexicans came out to South Africa and spent 2 weeks with me to learn what I'm doing. So I told them what to do, and this is a guy who's been doing it for a short period of time. He's getting some movement, and that grass in the distance there was in the middle of the the wetland, and gradually that grass would come out. But one of the guys who'd actually gone home and done something constructive, his property looked like that. Now that's next door to the first slide I showed you. Only livestock.
So he didn't spread any new seed or anything like that?
Nothing, he just changed the way he managed. And he grew that. So what are we dealing with? We go back to the chaos that is out there, and we try and manage the chaos, and at every half degree there's boom and bust, and every boom and bust is trying to reach equilibrium, but we never get to equilibrium because the weather throws a curveball at us, and immediately we go back to boom and bust in a different direction. So it looks a bit like this. So we get soil surface, bare soil on the left, covered soils on the right. And the degree of variation in populations is boom and bust. And the rest is...
Ian, you mentioned about not putting seed on because the seed is already in the soils. A lot of our soils haven't been farmed for a hell of a long time, so the grass seed would have been whatever native seeds were in there plus whatever's been put in 120 years ago. If there's not really ever been any deep-rooted grass seeds like chicories or plantains and stuff put in, are we still going to need to put, not direct drill any deep-rooted seeds because there will be things that are there?
Because it's not grassland traditionally, it's
I
forest.
don't understand. You're telling me what
So-
hundreds of New Zealanders have told me.
Yeah, so what
I don't care.
But so, on more recent pastures, especially on the hills, where they definitely haven't been drilled before, what deep-rooted seeds are we going to likely get? I mean, are we going to get those deep-rooted ones that are going to start to break down that top of the parter or the clays, or does it not really matter? We'll just start
You will
building
get
up.
them, they're there. Look at those slides that I showed you of that guy in North Island where the sheep, because of the way they had grazed originally, we increased the numbers in the herd, has put down carbon on certain areas and certain flat areas. Something different happened. The same will happen on your property.
So is it seeds that's in their gut that's coming through?
No. Seeds are there. As much as, however far back into those forests or whatever, I don't know. New Zealanders have a long story to tell me why it's not going to work. And I mean the long story, that's why I was patient to listen to all you had to say. It makes
No,
a difference.
I'm happy not to have to
Yeah.
throw more seed in the ground.
Try it, do an intrusion zone there, go up to one of the flats, if you haven't been able to achieve it with animal impact, put a bale down, spread it out, next time animals are there, tread it onto the ground until it's well in contact with the ground. Those bacteria and fungi haven't got legs, they can't jump up, and they need to be in contact with the soil, and something different is gonna happen. Just try it and try it on your own property, because you guys are gonna walk out of here and not believe me anyway. Because I'm an idiot from Africa. No, I'm serious, guys. And in any case, only 12% of what, 2% at least, not 12%, of what I tell you today is going to be absorbed because your paradigms are preventing anything else from going in.
Well, we took about 2/5 of our property out to plant trees so that it wasn't grey. And one of the places we called, they're both sun places actually, so we get rid of grass in the summer. And because of the taking out of grazing, when we walked through the grass as long as there's tears, there's all sorts of stuff. And we think, oh, look at that. Using them before. Yeah.
And then we had that conversation, do we, Nicky and Roger, about,
Yeah.
oh geez, did you need to plant trees in the first place?
I wondered when that was going to come. 50% of the farmers, ranchers in the world practice some form of holistic management. We could sequestrate enough carbon to get it back to pre-industrial era within 5 years. The CO2 level within 5 years. But because the timber industry got their foot in the door, they are recognized as sequestrating carbon, and yet they're destroying the environment faster than we are. And who cares? You know, the politician will only make money as long as he lives, so that's fine. When he falls off the perch, all becomes good. Okay, so you'll be seeing that again. Don't worry too much about it. And we go back to Elaine Ingham's work with the soil food web, because that is what we work with. That is what we can manipulate. And we go to a property in Lubbock, Texas. When I arrived there, 125 yards by 125 yards grew enough grass to feed one cow for one day. Same property 5 years later. That is the first calf heifer. Guys, the only thing that chap did was change his management. Didn't change the number of animals he had. And by changing his management, he had followed me around for 4 years. And I said to him, do you not understand my accent? And he said, no, it's got nothing to do with accent. I don't know how to start. So he brought a map of his property, and I said, well, what's the problem? He said, my paddock, my smallest paddock is 1,200 acres. So I said, invite me home and I will put up a fence for you. And we put up one fence across 1,200 acres. We divided it roughly in half. We started putting a fence up, single-strand electric fence, and the Mexican working with me, I said, where's the boss? He said, he's straightening the fence at the back. I went back and I said, I don't want to be rude to you, but there is no straight line in nature. Just take the children, go up to the hill and watch us do whatever we do. We put the fence up. He subsequently put another 3 fences in paddocks of 1,200 acres, and this is what happened. He grew more food than his animals could eat. But look what happened. The prickly pear started to die, because nature put prickly pear on the ground because he couldn't cover the soil, because he hadn't got enough animals to put a hoof print wherever there was bare soil. So nature put the prickly pear. That prickly pear has not been sprayed, people. And that's what it looks like. It's dying. So grass grows. What does grass do? You get density. You tread it on the ground. The carbon holds the moisture. Prickly pear cannot grow where there is moisture. It can't stand moisture. It dies. It got a fungus, and the fungus killed it. Look at it. It's dead. Looks like it's been sprayed. There is no spray used on that property. So we go to Tennessee, and the guy was using his property and had only a few cattle, and the problem being most of his property was under timber. I said, "Do you graze the timber?" He said, "No, we're not allowed to." And this is a good example of what you must do to save yourself and don't worry about the government. He said the government tells us if you put animals into timber, you don't harvest proper trees. So I told him to feed his animals in the pasture, at least in the timber. So he grazed his pastures in the spring, and then that winter he put them in the timber, and that is medium stock density. Okay? So from that, it went to that. And at high stock density, where he rolled out a lot of bales, in 6 months he created that. That's how easy it is. So now he grazes in the spring on his pastures. He goes into the timber in the middle of summer when it's hot in Tennessee, and he goes back onto his pastures in the fall. And he's more than doubled his cattle. Not only that, he's got enough food, he's doing pigs as well. Back in Africa, this is communal stuff. We managed to get just over 2,000 head in a herd. And because of lime, they have to go into an enclosure every night. So we got these people to put the enclosure on an area where they're going to plant their maize. I don't know if you call it corn in this country, but anyway. And the guy that used a stick, his big toe, and 3 pips per hole, one for the cutworm, one for the wild fowl, and one for himself. No fertilizer, grew 5 ton a hectare. The people who got tractors, fertilizer and free seed grew nothing. It died at that height. The fertilizer killed the ground. They weren't given enough fertilizer to take the plant beyond that. And so it goes on. So you don't need all the inputs. So I'm giving a talk in Missouri, and a guy's jumping up and down. And I said, "Do you want the toilet?" He said, "No." I just want to give you a slide. I was here 2 years ago, and you told me to put carbon in and on the soil. So this is his property, and there's his fence line with his neighbor. So he put carbon in here, and he's got no snow, but the neighbor, a week later, has still got that on the ground. Carbon is an insulator. So it insulates the ground from getting too hot, and it insulates the ground from getting too cold. What do you think is going to happen? More species of grass grow for longer periods of time. You produce more food, you capture more energy. You will be embarrassed by the number of animals that you can keep on your property. A lot of the guys in America are embarrassed by the money they're now making, and they're buying stupid things like sawmills and all sorts of other stuff. But you know, it's about quality of life. I should charge on money saved, a percentage of what I save people. Arkansas. Sacrifice paddock. But look, anaerobic microbes, horses. Little yellow flowers. No, who's got horses? You see that hoof, it compacts. A cow's hoof and sheep hoof does not compact. So that was a sacrifice paddock. They fed there in the mud during the winter and wondered why their cattle didn't perform. So I asked them, please don't do that, but we'll talk about that later in more detail. Biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants. Go from 1 to 2 to 3 and further, because that's what's happened, and if you're missing one of those, the sequence cannot continue.
So what are you suggesting if you haven't got some of those?
I suggest you use free choice minerals, but I know you guys can't get them in this country, so you better phone Free Choice Enterprise in Wisconsin and ask them if they'll supply you. Just don't be like the Australians who wanted a backhand, a customs guy. And Free Choice Enterprises wouldn't deal with Australia after that. So that is animal impact, and that tree, that open woodland scenario, was because that was a sorting pen and had high animal impact, but the last animal on that part of the ranch happened to be about 8 or 9 years ago. Beautiful. That's what the rest of the ranch looked like. If you haven't got animals, it will go to gorse, it will go to brush, it will go to trees, as it has the prickly pear and mesquite trees. There's no grass in there. The cattle that were grazing there came out looking like porcupine on their noses here. They just had prickly pear, that's all they could eat. And again, we're told to keep animals out of the waterway. But here, look what's happened. All the banks of grass, they're now secure, they don't flood, they don't get washed out. Because that's where the fence used to be. We took the fence out. We didn't tell the government. These guys produce 48% of the tomatoes in southern Africa. I don't know how many you grow tomatoes. No fertilizer, no insecticides, no fungicides, no herbicides. Only compost tea, manipulating the fungal bacterial relationship, and look what happened. They only pick first grade tomatoes. And their tomatoes, if you use a fridge, will last you 6 weeks to 2 months. They don't go rotten. But something. If you measure the bricks in those tomatoes, it is massive compared to other people's tomatoes. And all they've done is this. So why don't you?
So where's theirs set? Oh, man.
Sorry?
Whereabouts do the tomatoes sit there?
Vines? It's quite simple. So you can do what you want to do, and it goes back to quality of life. It's what you want to do. And again, these guys are very similar to your South Island weather conditions. They grow huge amounts of food. It gets a bit hotter than South Island. 2 businessmen from New York got out at the peak of the stock exchange. They bought up broken dairy farms. They leased the equivalent area for cutting hay, and they started farming. When I got there, I said to them, you don't need to use all this leased ground to cut hay. They dropped that in the first year. In the second year, they cut enough hay on the ground they owned to feed all the cattle they had, plus cut enough hay for 2 winters. You guys hear that? That's equivalent to 3 times what they were originally doing, and they did it in 2 years. So they are looking, they sell their meat straight into New York. They used to go through a wholesaler. The meat that they're selling, because they are farming off grass and no insecticides, no herbicides, no medicines, their meat has become so in demand that they've got rid of the wholesaler. And the meat is sold on the property and goes into New York. So we go back to that property of mine and you see what is possible. It grows more grass. more leaf surface area, because if you have litter on the ground, your soil is protected. You can leave a longer recovery period because the plants aren't stressed, they're not looking for water, they're not looking for fertility. Leaving a longer recovery period, the surface area gets bigger because the leaves get bigger and longer, they capture more energy. Energy is money. Longer recovery periods, more energy capture, less stress for the manager. Shall we move on to that ranch in Texas? When I got there, at the end of the non-growing season, there was no water in this river. This is at the end of 10 years. The water flowing off this property is huge. I'm talking too long. So that's what it looks like, and originally there's a lake, there still is a lake below here which provides municipal water for the community, and they would send a huge excavator to straighten the river to get the water to flow into the lake quicker and faster. And luckily they'd only been there 2 days, and I told them to get the excavator out of there. So the more willows, the more bulrushes and things on the top end of the ranch, the better it was. And in 10 years this is flowing, and the people who run the lake have come to him and said, what have you done? We are getting more water off your property, even though his animal numbers are 4 times what they were. So if you manage correctly, whether you're having an excess of water or a shortage of water, you will reach that equilibrium that you saw on that graph, and you will make more money. And that's all about that. I don't need to show you anymore, but we need to show you that, because at 7 everything happens correctly. pH 7. You do not need lime to get your soils at 7. Lime is a fine aggregate and will cause your soils to compact. All you need to do is put down carbon and you will achieve exactly that. But I want you to look at the bottom here. There. Roughage digestion. At 7 is maximized. Once you go that way, so when a guy who's running a dairy emails me and he said, all my cows are pH over 10, you wonder what's happening? They're starving. And most cows, I better be careful what I say here. Most cows in New Zealand are starving. Most dairy cows. I believe you can't really get milk out of an animal that's starving. But anyway, we move on. So I believe in free choice minerals, because the animal takes up the mineral it needs. And if the pH is correct, you can see the uptake of minerals is correct. But the minute the pH goes wrong, you have problems with uptake of various minerals.
Does anyone here in town use, or in New Zealand, have access to free choice minerals, or you only get what you can get from the big boys?
A lot of people are starting to mess around with it and try and work out. I can't give you the mixtures because the person who gave it to me, Mark Bader, did it to me as a favor, and he said don't give it to anybody, so I won't give it to anybody, but it works. So at home, I used to do free choice minerals, and Mark Bader made me, or suggested I do it, and I bought minerals from him, and I bought enough minerals for 6 months. My animals finished the minerals in 3 weeks. Mark and I didn't talk for 2 or 3 years. He called me arrogant and he was rude. But we became great friends, and said don't try and get minerals if you don't get the pH right. Get the grazing right. Minerals are only 3% of the animal. When you get to fine-tuning the carburetor, you start with minerals, but don't until you get there. So don't feed dicalcium phosphate or monocalcium phosphate, because calcium binds phosphate, and only 32% of the phosphate is available if you feed calcium with it. There are other products which are fed to humans that are totally absorbable into an animal. And animals, what's the word? I'll get it later, it doesn't matter. So we need to get the pH right. So an animal's metabolism is like a combustion engine. Oxygen, hydrogen, and protein. Okay? If you've got a combustion engine and it is running, and it is running perfectly, you take the air cleaner off and put a rag in there, what happens to the running of that engine? It doesn't run properly. And it's exactly the same with the metabolism in an animal. But we're going to go into that in detail later, so don't panic.
On that pH thing, you're talking about soil pH or the animal pH?
However close you can get to 7, the better off everything's going to be. But don't worry about the soil, because putting down carbon is a buffer and will get you close to 7. With an animal pH, it mustn't go lower than 6.5 or up to 7.5. And there's pH paper that measures it. It's from 4 to 9. Obviously, don't run after the cow. Me with my hips, I can't catch it in midair. Wait till it falls on the grass and just wipe it in the grass. Important. So there it is, and an animal doesn't lie, people. It just takes what it needs. So in South Africa, the nutritionists say animals only eat what tastes good. So they got 5 animals out of 100 and they nuked them. They couldn't see, they couldn't hear, they couldn't smell, they couldn't taste, everything. They nuked the head, put them back in the herd, and the animals took exactly the same minerals as the animals that weren't nuked.
So what's the message there?
The message there is, if you have soil tests done, most soil laboratories are owned by fertilizer companies, and they will sell you the fertilizer they just bought from China.
But you're also saying that you shouldn't give free choice minerals until you've got your carbon levels up?
No, until you balance the pH of the animal's rumen.
Yeah.
Also, animals, whatever, they will only take what they need, use it and redistribute it over your property. So over time, you shouldn't need, depending on density, you shouldn't need minerals.
Mm-hmm.
But I've decided to help dairy farmers in our country, and I supply them with minerals. And farmers who are using it don't get mastitis, don't get tick-borne diseases, don't get other diseases. Most of them that were mating in 3 sessions to try and get all the animals on calf only mate once now. Others who were douching cows because they were not clean don't douche anymore. So the minerals, an animal self-medicates if it can get the minerals. So that's some of the guys in South Africa built their own dispensers. Throw away 25-litre containers in metal frame, and it's actually on wheels. So if a dairy farmer, just build it outside the dairy, and the cows can take it morning and evening. They'll just take a little bit and move on. And the only problem in brittle environments about getting all this carbon on the ground is fire. So this guy in Texas is now looking after himself instead of the fire brigade having to come and put the fire out. And he builds fire guards. As you can see, a road, this, and then as soon as the first frost comes, he burns from there to the blacktop. And I really don't mind what you do as long as you have fun.
Is that what a lion did?
Sorry?
Did the lion do that?
Yeah. They had fun. No, we gotta go back, we go that way.
How long did it take them?
I don't know. All I know is that those people have to send their clothes for laundry often.
And both lines have fun because one of them started on the spear before.
So yeah, guys, you don't have to believe me, as long as you have fun, do what you need to do. I'm giving you some ideas about changing maybe what you do. But again, just have fun, it doesn't matter. Any questions?
Gorse. You've got a gorse block, what would you advise? How do you start?
I've got a gorse plot, I put a fence on it, and I'd stick my animals in there for a year. And you don't know more gorse.
Yeah. Regardless of how tall it is,
Sorry?
regardless of how tall the gorse is.
Yeah, I like the sagebush,
Yeah,
I'll get it done eventually,
yeah,
depending on density.
yeah.
But don't say I said because I won't be here now tonight.
So again, you change the fungi to fuel,
You don't need to line it or anything.
But if you want to send the money to Papa. Any other questions, guys? Good, stand up, take a walk, if you need to take a walk, and literally 5-10 minutes, we'll be back again.